by the way, that this event is being held in an international spy museum. Since much of what you're going to hear today deals with deliberate deception practiced by the State of Israel regarding its nuclear program that have far more serious implications to the United States than ordinary espionage, although there is some of that involved as well. On your way in, you may have noticed in the glass wall of declassified documents released under the Freedom of Information Act. But many documents that should populate that wall are missing, since the CIA and FBI continue to cover up information dealing with U.S.-Israel nuclear dealings. I can speak from personal experience as an espionage target, having been one of some 10,000 individuals and a member of more than one of some 600 organizations in Northern California alone that were spied on by a man, Erwin Sewell, who is the late head of the Intelligence Department of the Anti-Defamation League, referred to as, quote, my chief fact finder. Now, it's a matter of public knowledge, but not widely known, that an investigation by the FBI and the San Francisco Police Department in the early 90s revealed that the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith, or formerly part of B'nai B'rith, had been conducting for some years a massive spying operation on individuals and organizations throughout the United States. While a portion of these activities were devoted to exposing the activities of skinheads and neo-Nazi groups that operate at the margins of society, the major focus of that chief fact finder, a man by the name of Roy Bullock, were Palestinian and Arab American groups and anti-apartheid activists connected to the African National Congress, including black South African exiles residing in the United States or traveling here. Most of the spied on individuals and organizations fell into a section that Bullock labeled pinko groups. These included such organizations as the NAACP, the Asian Law Caucus, Irish Northern Aid, the American Civil Liberties Union, 20 labor unions, and the Labor Committee on the Middle East, of which I was a co-founder. Bullock, who I had met after he had infiltrated the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, was one of the early people signing up for our Labor Committee on the Middle East and attended our early meetings. As it turned out, he was spying on the anti-apartheid organizations, but he was not just doing it for the Anti-Defamation League. Bullock, the investigation revealed, was also being paid for providing information to agents for South African intelligence based in the San Francisco Bay Area, after being recruited for the job by a San Francisco cop buddy of his. Spying for South Africa required no greater effort on Bullock's part, because, as he admitted during a deposition, he was already doing that for the Anti-Defamation League. And I was also an anti-apartheid activist myself, so I counted both as a pro-Palestinian activist as an anti-apartheid activist of both counts. During the 30 years Bullock had been working for the ADL, and up to his arrest and exposure, he had been paid through a cutout in Beverly Hills, a lawyer named Bruce Hochman, who was a former head of the Los Angeles Jewish Federation. When, rather than firing Bullock, when it was revealed he had been working for South Africa, or offering an apology for his spying, the ADL put him directly on their payroll. Several class action lawsuits were brought against the ADL, but only one had the measure of success. It was filed by former Congressman Pete McCloskey on behalf of those who had been targeted by Bullock for their work against both Israel's occupation of the West Bank and Gaza and against South African apartheid. The case was in litigation for about 10 years, and by the end there were 3 of us left. When all their appeals were exhausted, the ADL offered and we agreed to a settlement, with a stipulation, very important stipulation, that we would not be restricted to a confidentiality agreement, which allowed me to talk about this case. In pursuit of the case, we learned the ADL provided information on my activities and those of my 2 plaintiffs to the governments of Israel and South Africa. A telling moment occurred during a deposition taken by Pete McCloskey, former congressman, of former Mossad agent Victor Ostrovsky, who also exposed the lack of space, which also exposed the lack of space that exists between the Anti-Defamation League and Israeli intelligence. Ostrovsky, you may recall, published 2 books about his experience with the Mossad, both bestsellers, that exposed the inner workings of the Israeli spy agency. Well, they provided no useful information about the ADL for us. What astonished us, and astonished Ostrovsky, was when the lawyers to the Anti-Defamation League demanded that Ostrowski turn over to them the documents that he had taken when he had left the Mossad. Now here are lawyers from the American Jewish Organization demanding from his former Mossad agent that he give them the papers he had taken with them. Of course, he denied their request, but his request still is on the record. And if you want more evidence about the connection, I can't find a better piece of evidence. Of course, Ostrowski says, at the time you may recall, and if not, you'll learn today from one of our panelists, Sasha Polakow-Suransky, that South Africa had become a close ally of Israel and continued to be so, even when the Apartheid regime was subject to sanctions, and not just when it came to nuclear weapons. Here, for example, is a page from the Financial Mail of South Africa, January 31st, 1986. It's a blown-up copy of the page. The bold-faced headline reads, "The Israeli Connection." The article is illustrated by a colorful hourglass with a South African flag at the top, a Star of David symbolizing Israel in the center, and an American flag on the bottom. And that's us. And it's intended to illustrate how apartheid in South Africa would benefit from the Israel-U.S. Free Trade Agreement, which had been pushed by AIPAC and approved the previous December by the Reagan administration over the objections of some of America's leading corporations, such as Monsanto and Dow Chemical, which shows you the power of AIPAC and the Zionist lobby here in this country. In a large section reads, many companies are grasping opportunities provided by a technology agreement between South Africa and Israel. Exporting technology to the United States through Israel is one of the many advantages under a new agreement. At the time, I sent a copy of this article to the Representative Danny Fassel, Chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Fassel wrote to me that he was going to forward my letter to Lee Hamilton and Howard Wolpe, who were the chairs of the subcommittee on Europe and the Middle East and Africa, respectively. I never heard a word back from either of them, and there was no evidently any follow-up on this case. A clear violation of international sanctions and U.S. law.